Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to my channel. Welcome, curious minds, to our video that explores the ins and outs of international mechanism of scientific expertise on biodiversity. The consultative process towards an IMoSEB international mechanism of scientific expertise on biodiversity was a multidisciplinary effort from 2005 to 2008 that involved a large number of stakeholders and had a considerable political and media audience. Its aim was the creation of a value-added process by taking into account existing and current initiatives and mechanisms. Initiated at the International Conference Biodiversity, Science and Governance in January 2005, it ended in November 2007 with the final meeting of its International Steering Committee ISC. IMoSEB results were congrued with the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment follow-up to create the Intergovernmental Science-Policy platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services IPBES, led by UNEP. IPBES first meeting took place in November 2008 in Putrajaya, Malaysia. Now, let's redirect our focus towards International Conference Biodiversity, Science and Governance and discover its significance in our narrative. During the international conference held in January 2005, President Jacques Chirac launched a call for action to set up an IPCC-like for biodiversity. The final declaration of the conference recommended in response the launch of an international multi-stakeholder consultative process guided by a balanced multi-stakeholder steering committee. This process would assess the need for an international mechanism which would provide a critical assessment of the scientific information and policy options required decision-making, build on existing bodies, current and recent activities. A provisional steering committee, based on the scientific and organizational committee of the conference, was set up to define the IMoSEB steering committee and its modalities of work. As we progress, let's zoom in on Open Science Conference DIVRS-ITAS and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. During the DIVRS-ITAS conference held in Osaka in October 2005, the scientific community reiterated its support to the consultative process and for the establishment of a scientific panel on biodiversity that included an intergovernmental component. Welcome to the next segment, where we explore CBD-SBSTTA11 and its significance in our journey. A first presentation of the consultative process, its modalities of work, its goals and possible outcomes were presented during the 11th meeting of the Convention on Biological Diversity CBD-SBSTTA in December 2006. With our curiosity piqued, let's embark on a dedicated exploration of International Steering Committee, Executive Committee, Executive Secretariat and its fascinating intricacies. The International Steering Committee ISC was composed of about 90 members. 1. Scientists from various disciplines: natural, social, applied and environmental sciences and countries: Gaston Akodong, Carlo Hype, Leonard Hirsch, Ivan Lamajo, Michel Laurie, Keping Mo, Georgina Mace, Alfred Otingibo, Charles Perrings, Peter Raven, Jose Sorokin, Robert Scholes, Arkady Tishkov, Jacques Weber. 2. Representatives of governments: Algeria, Austria, Canada, China, Costa Rica, Denmark, France, Gabon, Germany, India, Iran, Italy, Jamaica, Madagascar, Malawi, Malaysia, Morocco, Namibia, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea, Poland, Saudi Arabia, Senegal, Slovenia, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Thailand, UK, United States. 3. Intergovernmental or international organizations, United Nations and specialized agencies, non-governmental organizations, research initiatives and others: CITES, CMS, Conservation International, Diversitas, IPBES, European Commission, EEA, FAO, GBIF, Greenpeace as Observer, ICES, CIEM, ICSU, Institut Français de la Biodiversité, International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, IPGRI, IUCN, Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, Ramsar Convention, RAIPON, Swedish Scientific Council on Biological Diversity, Swiss Biodiversity Forum, the Nature Conservancy, UNCBD, UNCBDSBSTTA, UNCCD, UNEPDEWA, UNEPWCMC, UNESCO, United Nations University IAS, World Bank WWF. An executive committee (EC) was appointed to draft a plan of action for the consultation phase. The executive committee is co-chaired by Alfred Otingebo and Michelle Laurie, and the following people became members of the EC: Eva Based, Martha Chavchina Rojas, Christine Dawson, Horst Korn, Kepping Ma, Georgina Mace, Martha Mapango, Charles Perrings, Peter Raven, Jose Sarukan, Robert Watson, Jock Weber. The Executive Secretariat was composed of the Executive Secretary, Didier Babin, Institut Français de la Biodiversité, and Maxime Fiben, Institut Français de la Biodiversité. The Executive Secretariat (ES) was responsible for coordination and promotion of the consultative process. An Origatory DIVERSITAS contributed to the work of this Secretariat. The spotlight now falls on first ISC meeting and its conclusions as we delve deeper into its details. The consultative process was officially launched in February 2006 at its first meeting in Paris at the French National Museum of Natural History. More than 90 participants attended the meeting. The meeting overall ended with the agreement to undertake a review of what is needed in the biodiversity science policy interface, based on a study of existing mechanisms, hold a consultation that would foster an open dialogue and explore several possible options. The executive committee was asked to consider these two tasks and developed a plan of action for the consultation. A first step, based on case studies, aiming at map out the decision-making landscape affecting biodiversity, analyze, using case studies, successes and failures to preserve biodiversity at different scales, analyze existing models delivering scientific expertise. Based on the results of the studies, the executive committee identified a series of needs and formulated a number of possible options as basis for discussion during regional consultations, seeking feedback on these propositions. Let's now turn our attention to case studies and uncover the fascinating insights it brings to the table. Several case studies on the science policy interface on biodiversity and on how scientific is used in decision-making processes have been conducted in use of basic scientific information and its application to policies for the conservation and management of biodiversity in Mexico. Lessons from invasive alien species management in a marine environment, fisheries and expertise. The role and contribution of biodiversity science expertise to understanding and illuminating decision-making on the emergence and spread of an avian influenza, mobilizing traditional knowledge and expertise for decision-making on biodiversity science policy interface, the role of scientific assessments. In the upcoming section, we'll be shining a light on niche options. The following needs have been identified by the Executive Committee on the basis of the results of the case studies and from voluntary contributions about the effectiveness with which scientific and other relevant knowledge is used in decisions that affect biodiversity, ecosystem services, and human well-being at the international scale. 1. To bring insights from the relevant sciences and other forms of knowledge to bear on local and national decisions that affect biodiversity where those decisions have international consequences, and where existing decision processes appear to be relatively ill-informed by science and other forms of relevant knowledge, e.g. on transmission of invasive pests and pathogens, and exploitation of common pool resources in areas beyond national jurisdiction. 2. To provide independent scientific information from all relevant sources to support the work of international conventions and institutions, with particular emphasis on the CBD. 3. To enhance the capacity to predict the consequences of current actions affecting biodiversity, drawing on the sciences of both natural and social systems. 4. To provide, proactively, scientific advice on emerging threats and issues associated with biodiversity change identified either by science, and to be responsive to concerns about potential threats expressed by stakeholders. 5. To communicate scientific results on biodiversity to wider relevant audiences. 6. To provide scientific support to existing biodiversity and related monitoring and assessment exercises, and potentially to supplement these as necessary. 7. To reduce the time lag between the publication of scientific results on biodiversity and their incorporation in decision processes. 8. To inform science and science funding agencies about biodiversity research priorities implied by decision-makers' concerns. Options formulated by the EC as basis for discussion. 1. To form a partnership with existing mechanisms for delivering science to national and international decision-making bodies. This option would have three main functions: to create a new mechanism, modeled loosely on the IPCC, but with both intergovernmental and non-governmental components. 3. To invite the IPCC to consider developing a biodiversity aspect to their activity. 4. Using and strengthening existing networks of independent scientists to feed science, standards and principles from existing academies and councils into different fora through a small coordination mechanism. In the upcoming section, we'll be dissecting regional consultations and exploring its intricate connections to our topic. In 2007, a set of regional consultations were organized, involving more than 300 participants and 40 international regional organizations from 70 countries. These consultations took place in Montreal for North America, Bound for Africa, Geneva for Europe, Beijing for Asia, Barlek for South America, Alota for Pacific. Get ready for an exciting part as we dive into final International Steering Committee. The final ISC took place in Montpellier in November 2007 and defined what could be and do a possible IMoSEB. The main features of an IMoSEB would be supported by networks of scientists and knowledge holders with the capacity to conduct assessments and able to answer quickly in case of ecological crisis. The mechanism would be independent, involving mainly researchers nominated by governments, and proposed by the scientific community with involvement of international organizations and conventions hosted by UNEP. 2008 agenda included 1. An intergovernmental meeting to define better this mechanism and its funding held in Nov 2008 in Putrajaya, Malaysia. 2. Presentation at CBDCOP9 in Bonn in May 2008. In this segment, we'll be unraveling the complexities of final document of the consultative process and exploring its multifaceted nature. 1. A final report including all the IMoSEB outputs, available here. 1. 2. A poster presenting the process, available here. 2. Have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future videos? Let me know in the comments.